Discover how a millionaire single dad transformed an amazing blind date with a hidden truth about his past. Jake sat at a small table in the quaint coffee shop, his espresso turning cold in front of him. As an accomplished architect, he was no stranger to pressure, but tonight was different. The excitement of meeting Sarah, an art teacher and single mom, had quickly morphed into a pulsing discomfort. The events of the evening crackled with latent energy, and as he fidgeted with the paper napkin, he felt a knot tightening in his chest. Was this a chance at love, or just a reminder of his shortcomings as an absent father to 8-year-old Emma? The cacophony of the bustling Nashville neighborhood beyond the window faded into a dull roar. Why couldn't he shake this sense of unease? With every anecdote Sarah shared about her artistic struggles, Jake's mind drifted to the pressing guilt of prioritizing work over family. Growing up in a modest household, he'd learned that hard work led to success. But now this wealth felt like a gilded cage. What kind of father stayed busy while his daughter sketched alone at home? Jake took a sip, the bitter liquid staining his tongue as realization dawned. One shared moment could alter everything. Would he finally find balance between being a father and a self-made millionaire? But then, Sarah's revelation hit him like a car crash. Her father, a once respected architect, had faced disgrace due to a devastating scandal. It was a scandal deeply entwined with his own mentor, a man who had been instrumental in shaping Jake's career. An avalanche of conflicting emotions washed over him. Should he support Sarah, loyal to her family narrative, or stood in adherence to the man who had helped him rise? The tension tightened around him, curling in his gut like a serpent. As Jake glanced toward Sarah, her gentle eyes sparkled with warmth, unaware of the tempest brewing inside him. Emma's laughter flashed across his mind, her tiny hands filled with crayons, sometimes bringing him back to reality. What would he tell her? That he chose comfort and tradition over empathy and understanding? He wrestled his thoughts. His heart ached with the knowledge that Sarah was just one innocent soul caught in a web of history and secrets. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A shadow flickered at the door, pulling Jake's gaze like a magnet. As it swung open, a familiar figure slid into the cafe. Jake's heart pinched. It was his mentor, the very architect whose prestige loomed like a specter. The weight of unspoken judgments crashed down upon him, his thoughts scurrying in all directions. Would the mentor's presence diminish this fragile connection he'd begun to forge with Sarah? Or worse, would it send her running, away from the budding romance simmering between them? The air thickened with an unnameable tension, a tension that chilled Jake to the bone. Here he sat, at a crossroads of familial loyalty and budding love. Would he confront this dichotomy, or retreat to the safety of his mentor's shadow? The night seemed imbued with an electric energy, holding its breath, waiting for Jake to make the choice that would define not just this moment, but the future of his relationship with Emma and Sarah. As he breathed in shallowly, the decision weighed heavily on him, and the stakes rose impossibly high, marking the start of an emotional showdown that had only just begun. Jake's heart raced as he locked eyes with his mentor, Tom, who had entered the cafe with a casual confidence that contrasted sharply with Jake's internal turmoil. Tom was the embodiment of professional success, an architect whose name was synonymous with grand designs and towering skylines. Jake had long admired him, but tonight, admiration was replaced by a knot of apprehension. The pressure of his mentor's gaze felt like a spotlight, exposing the insecurities he'd kept hidden. "Jake, fancy seeing you here," Tom said, his voice warm yet edged with expectation. I hope you don't mind me joining you. Of course not, Jake managed, gesturing to the empty seat across from him, though his mind screamed at him to resist. He could already sense the judgment hidden in each of Tom's words, a judgment that seemed to accentuate the contrast between his mentor's life and his own. Sarah, perceptive as always, sensed the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Her brows furrowed slightly, and Jake realized how uncharacteristic he must appear. The tension was palpable, a suffocating blanket shrouding the evening, threatening to extinguish the connection that had sparked only moments before. He caught Sarah's eyes drifting between him and Tom, searching for an explanation for the sudden change. "Nice to meet you," Sarah said, offering a polite smile, but Jake could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Her vulnerability mirrored his own, a reflection of uncertainty, in a moment where clarity was desperately needed. "Ah," the artist, Tom said, feigning interest but quickly turning to Jake. "So how are the projects going? Heard you've been busy with some new developments?" Jake felt the question hang in the air like a guillotine, poised to drop. "It's going well, Tom," he replied, feeling his pulse quicken. "We're working on a few interesting designs, trying to push boundaries." "Good to hear," Tom responded, unimpressed. He shifted back toward Sarah. "And what kind of art do you teach?" As they exchanged pleasantries, Jake's mind draped heavy drapes of disappointment and frustration over the moment. Doubts whispered insidiously that perhaps his mentor didn't just represent the professional world he longed to merge with. He embodied the very critique that rattled Jake's core. Resentment bubbled beneath the surface, the inkling that the respect he held for Tom was entwined with the pressure to conform to a path of prestige devoid of personal fulfillment. As Sarah detailed her experiences with her students, a warmth radiated from her, grounding Jake with a sense of clarity that cut through his distractions. She spoke passionately, and in those moments, he saw not just a woman but a companion who understood the ebbs and flows of creativity, who knew the bittersweet nature of artistry. "Tell me," Jake interjected, pivoting back to Sarah as Tom's engagement waned, "what inspires you to teach?" Her answer unfolded an unexpected depth of shared vulnerabilities drawing from her past, illuminating a love affair with art that had always been eclipsed by hardship. She spoke of resilience through heartbreak, and Jake felt the weight of his own unresolved struggle shift slightly. It was as if a door opened, allowing in light where only shadows existed. When Sarah finished, Jake realized he had extracted a profound truth. Perhaps he could build a bridge between his role as a father, his passions, and the professional demands of his life. However, the specter of Tom loomed still, and Jake could not ignore the loyalty that cut like shards through his conscience. "It sounds like you both got a lot going on," Tom interrupted, leaning back, crossing his arms with a smirk. "Just make sure you don't get too distracted by romance, Jake. Architecture is a demanding field." Jake's jaw tightened at the disdain veiled in Tom's words. The moment crackled with adversity. He sensed the guiding principle of his mentor clawing at the very roots of his emerging identity and echoes signaling that ambition and personal happiness could not coexist. And for the first time, Jake was faced not only with a decision affecting Sarah and Emma, but also with a choice regarding his own truths. The question lingered. Would he continue to appease the shadows of his past, or step boldly into the light of self-discovery and authentic connection? Just then, a realization struck him like a lightning bolt. He was at a nexus, not merely of romance, but of profound self-acceptance. Resolving to confront the past and seize his future, Jake's gaze hardened. The path ahead was murky, but clarity began to dawn. The evening still held surprises. What awaited him in the shadows was yet unknown, and the choices were not simply about his aspirations and fear, but a reckoning with the powerful legacy of decisions that stretched into the abyss of uncertainty. The moment was fragile, yet poised on the cusp of transformation. As Sarah turned to him, a hopeful smile attempting to breach the tension, Jake felt a surge of determination and the undeniable urge to confront Tom. This had to end, and the time had come to face the truths binding him to a past he was desperate to redefine. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the air prick with electric tension as he faced Tom. The cafe around them faded into a mere backdrop of muted chatter and clinking porcelain, leaving the confrontation as the sole focus of his universe. Tom's presence felt constricting, a reminder of paths he had walked but could no longer bear. "Tom," Jake said, his voice steady but laden with a steely resolve. "I need to talk to you about something." In that moment, anything felt more palatable than continuing under the weight of Tom's dismissive gaze. Tom raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "About what, exactly?" There was a slight inflection in his tone, the type that suggested both curiosity and defense. Jake could feel Sarah shifting slightly in her seat, a silent witness, yet her support remained an unspoken anchor. Jake's pulse quickened. He realized that Tom's perception of success had been a mirror reflecting his fears. "I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be an architect, a designer, a creator. It's not just about aesthetics or the prestige associated with it. It's about purpose, influence, and the responsibility we bear as creators." The challenge in Jake's words hung suspended in the air, each syllable carrying the weight of his shifting paradigm. Tom's smirk faltered momentarily, and Jake seized the opportunity to plunge deeper. "And honestly, I don't think I want to chase the same vision you built your reputation on anymore." A moment of silence wrapped around them, and Jake felt vulnerability brush against his carefully constructed defenses. Tom's expression twisted, transitioning from mild annoyance to something resembling concern. "Are you suggesting that you don't want to pursue your career here anymore?" Jake leaned in, his determination solidifying with each word. "I want to explore my own path. It doesn't have to match yours, nor does it need to adhere to conventional expectations. I want to create spaces that resonate with who I am, not just a portfolio piece, but something meaningful that reflects the lives of those who inhabit them." Tom's laughter was devoid of warmth, a cold echo of disbelief. "That's naive, Jake. In this industry, you need to prioritize your professional image. It's the only way to survive. You can't afford to dawdle with dreams that don't pay the bills." Jake felt anger flare, but he quickly extinguished it. This was not about their contrasting philosophies, nor was it simply about a disagreement. It was about the reclamation of his narrative, a narrative he had allowed Tom to dictate for too long. "Do you think that's all there is to life? Bills and structures? I want to build more than just buildings. I want to promote a sense of community, to be remembered for the way I connect people to their environments," Jake challenged, his voice firm, yet tinged with self-doubt. Tom's look turned steely, and Jake realized he was witnessing the unraveling of a mentor's carefully constructed facade, a man married to an image that perhaps even he had begun to doubt. In that moment of raw honesty, Jake understood. Confronting Tom was just the beginning. To shape his dreams, he needed to confront himself. "Good luck with that," Tom retorted, though his eyes reflected uncertainty more than disdain. Jake locked his gaze upon Tom, unwilling to let the moment dissipate into the coffee-saturated air. "Don't mistake my resolve for weakness," Jake replied. "You've inspired me to push the boundaries, yes, but it's time I define what that means on my own terms. You've given me a solid foundation. Now, I'm ready to build my own story." As Tom fell silent, Jake felt an unexpected weight lift. He had finally acknowledged the shadows Tom cast over his professional identity. It was liberating to stand on the brink of defining himself. But just as Jake began to relish his newfound clarity, Sarah placed her hand on his, grounding him once more. "I believe in your vision, Jake. It's powerful to want to create, not just to exist," she said softly. Her faith infused him with additional strength, but doubt lingered. What had he promised Emily when he accepted this journey? What sacrifices would this new path demand? Every choice would bring its ripple effects. Jake felt the lingering apprehension in the air thickening again, a palpable tension, as he contemplated whether Tom would truly concede this battle, or whether their exchange would only escalate into an even deeper conflict. As they departed the cafe, the night stretched out before him, illuminated by the faint glow of streetlights. The decision had been made, but its implications were far from clear. Jake realized renewal was not purely triumphant. It demanded a reckoning with the past and a willingness to face unknown challenges ahead. The path of self-discovery was fraught with complexities, but as he stepped into the uncertain terrain of his future, one thing was clear: there was no turning back now. The next step awaited him, shadowed by uncertainty and possibility. Who would he become in a world that had once threatened to define him? And what hidden strengths lay dormant within, just waiting to be unleashed? The next morning, Jake awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The confrontation with Tom had unlocked something within him, stirring a mix of apprehension and exhilaration. He stared at the ceiling, tracing the patterns formed by the rafters, as he pondered what being true to himself would entail. Was it merely a matter of rebranding his approach to architectural design, or did it go deeper than that? Showering, he felt the cool water wash over him like a cleansing ritual. Each droplet seemed to dissolve the lingering doubts simmering beneath the surface. As he prepared his breakfast, he gazed out the window, observing the urban landscape, the very buildings he had once regarded as benchmarks of success, but now appeared as canvases for possibility. The day unfolded slowly. He grabbed his laptop and retreated to a cozy cafe, a different one this time. This cafe wasn't steeped in the tension of past conversations. Instead, it echoed with the soft hum of creativity. Settling at a corner table, he opened his laptop, the familiar glow sparking both anxiety and excitement. Jake stared at the blank screen, a daunting canvas of its own, and slowly began to type. Each keystroke was an assertion of his newfound clarity, a manifesto on a different approach to architecture that valued sustainability, community, and artistry over mere profit. The ideas flowed freely at first, but he soon hit a wall. What would his first project look like? He craved to make a mark, but feared that his vision might not translate to reality. In this moment of stage-light-fueled uncertainty, a familiar face cornered him, causing his heart to skip a beat. It was Emily, her presence immediately grounding him. "Hey there. I didn't know you took your work to the cafe," she said, her grin both infectious and supportive. She settled across from him, a cup of coffee appearing like a comforting shield. "Just trying to get my head around some new ideas," Jake said, forcing a smile despite the weight of his creative block. "It's tougher than I thought." Emily took a casual sip of her coffee, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What kind of ideas? You were always so passionate about creating experiences." Her words struck a chord. He remembered late-night discussions with her, where dreams thrived under the glow of laughter and aspiration. "I want to challenge traditional designs, to incorporate more of what connects people rather than what divides them, to make places feel alive." "Sounds incredible," she replied, leaning forward, eyes fixed on him as if he were offering a glimpse into a treasure chest. But Jake faltered, self-doubt creeping back. "What if it's just wishful thinking? What if nobody buys into this vision that holds so much meaning for me?" Emily regarded him seriously. "What does it matter if they believe? You need to build something fulfilling to you. The rest will follow. You have the talent, Jake. Don't let anyone else's doubts deter you." Her faith in him ignited a flicker of determination within. "You really believe that?" "Absolutely. Your story matters, Jake. Go tell it." Empowered by her belief, Jake fired up his laptop once more, hands trembling slightly, as he began to formulate a plan. He would research community initiatives, reach out to fellow architects who dared to think differently, and start sketching ideas that married practicality with impactful design. The world of architecture was daunting, but if he shifted his focus away from the status quo, he could carve a niche that resonated with his true self. Hours rolled into the afternoon, and ideas morphed into outlines, sketches flowing from his mind to the screen. He felt the spark of inspiration reigniting, a gentle fire that promised growth. As evening approached, Jake glanced outside, the sky shifting hues. It was time for action. The decision had been made. He would take the leap into the unknown, guided by a vision that was uniquely his own. But would the industry welcome his unorthodox approach? Would Tom, lurking in the shadows, launch an attack on his earnest ambition? With every ounce of resolve, Jake recognized that the path of self-definition would not be easy. He was bracing for the fight, but with newfound strength rooted in authenticity, he was finally prepared to face those challenges head-on. A subtle thrill coursed through him as he stepped out of the cafe, breathing in the crisp evening air. His journey had just begun, and as he hailed a cab, questions lingered in his mind that stirred both trepidation and hope. What would resisting conformity unveil about his capabilities? In the distance, a familiar silhouette appeared. Tom. Their eyes locked for just a heartbeat, an unspoken challenge hanging in the quiet between them. The stage was set for a confrontation that might redefine not just their relationship, but the very essence of what Jake could accomplish. As he stepped into the cab, he wondered, how far would he go to reclaim his narrative? And would he have the courage to confront the ghosts of his past in the pursuit of his dreams? Jake's heart raced as the cab drove away from the cafe. The image of Tom lingered in his mind, a specter of his past in the architecture industry that once loomed large over him. The doubts crept back with surprising ferocity, tightening their grip around his resolve. Would he be ready to stand his ground against someone who thrived on the conventional while Jake sought to redefine the landscape? He arrived at his apartment, a modest space cluttered with remnants of his previous life, a world dominated by trends and superficial accolades. Tonight, however, the chaos seemed to flow with purpose. A series of sketches were laid out on his dining table, a glimpse of his vision alive in pencil strokes. They felt raw and unrefined, but beneath the surface was a depth he longed to express. Sitting down, Jake scrutinized his work. Each line represented not just buildings, but a connection to the people who would inhabit them. As he drafted and redrafted, he could almost hear Emily's voice encouraging him. He was no longer merely following a blueprint, he was there to weave stories within spaces, to create experiences that resonated with life. Midnight approached, and as fatigue seeped into his bones, an idea struck him like a bolt of lightning. He would host a presentation, but not just any ordinary pitch to investors or senior architects. This would be a gathering of peers, like-minded artists, who could see beyond the surface, who understood the essence of spaces designed for community, not just commerce. He envisioned a warm studio, filled with sketches and models, where he could create a dialogue, not a monologue. It would allow him to share his vision and invite critiques, planting seeds of collaboration. This informal gathering, he realized, could serve as his litmus test for the ideas pulsating in his mind. But the looming fear of failure tinged every thought. What if he couldn't galvanize their interest? As he mulled over logistics, a sense of defiance welling within him, he decided to push the boundaries of his own expectations. This would mean reaching out to former colleagues, those who weren't part of Tom's established circle. Instead of retreating into anonymity, Jake would forge new connections, opening doors he had once closed without a second thought. He opened his laptop and began drafting emails. Each one felt like a direct challenge, a way to confront not only the industry's expectations, but also the remnants of self-doubt that gnawed at him. Would they see the potential in designs that strayed from the norm? Would they resonate with his desire to create spaces that foster genuine interactions rather than isolated ambition? As he clicked send on the last email, A wave of adrenaline rushed through him. There was no turning back. He was inviting scrutiny and support in equal measure, and in doing so, he was finally claiming his narrative. Suddenly the specter of Tom faded into a dim memory. His ambitions and ideas flickered more vividly in Jake's mind. Yet, just as excitement surged, it was met with a chilling reminder that Tom would surely hear about this gathering. The industry carefully monitored reputations, and taking a public stand meant risking judgment from skeptics. Would Tom wield his influence to sway the very architects Jake was looking to engage? To quell the uncertainty swirling in his thoughts, Jake immersed himself in preparation. He meticulously gathered materials, practiced his presentation, and painted a vision that aligned with the world he wished to create. The pressure was palpable, but instead of evaporating his determination, it solidified it. Hours passed, but sleep remained elusive. Success felt close enough to taste yet distant enough to unsettle him. He would rise to the occasion, irrespective of past failures or Tom's shadow looming closer. The upcoming gathering would transform into a showcase of his growth, a celebration of what he could achieve when embracing authenticity. As dawn broke, illuminating the cityscape with fresh hope, Jake stepped out into a world alive with possibility. He was ready for the day ahead, ready to face anyone, including Tom, who might challenge his vision. Could this be the moment where he finally redefined not just his career, but also the essence of architectural design? The buzz of success began to hum in the back of his mind, pushing him forward. How much weight and influence did Tom truly have? And what would happen when worlds inevitably collided? Jake awoke to the rhythmic hum of the city. His mind raced along with his pulse, the anticipation for the day ahead tangling with remnants of anxiety. As he brewed his coffee, a ritual steeped in routine, he could feel the weight of expectation pressing on him like a vice. It was not merely about the gathering. It was about confronting his own fears, peeling back layers of doubt, and redefining what success meant for him. He sifted through his sketches once more, each one a battleground where ideas clashed and coalesced. They reflected more than just architectural ambitions. They encapsulated his refusal to conform to a narrative dictated by others. As he adjusted the lighting to enhance the shadows and highlights on the pages, clarity flickered in his mind. Would the others see the heart within those lines? More importantly, would he allow himself to feel as deeply invested in their feedback as he had in the work itself? Every email he had sent out carried a piece of his vulnerability. His vision wasn't just pixels on a screen. It was his soul laid bare. Yet the specter of Tom and his conventional wisdom loomed larger in the rearview mirror. Jake wondered how many of those who would attend were swayed by Tom's gravitas. Would the affection for formulaic designs blind them to the beauty of innovative concepts? He questioned if he had the courage to withstand criticism that felt more about ego than evaluation. At the studio, he transformed the space into a sanctuary of open dialogue. Each table was a canvas, laden with models that reflected a vision of community-infused architecture. He included elements of nature, user interaction, and fluidity, concepts that flourished under a thoughtful examination. As guests trickled in, Jake felt a spark. Each face held a promise. These individuals shared his dream of reshaping the industry. Almost immediately, he noticed the mixed reactions as his colleagues fanned out the sketches. Some appeared intrigued, brows furrowing in concentration. Others hesitated, whispering under their breaths, likely influenced by unable to take a stand peer pressure. His stomach knotted with doubt. Correcting their perspectives had never felt so critical. "Jake, this is unorthodox," one attendee remarked, standing in front of the most daring sketch. "Are you trying to push architecture into something it's not?" The challenge resonated with the timid echo of Tom's voice, igniting a fire within him. "No," Jake replied, the determination surging in his throat. "I'm trying to awaken architecture to what it could be. Spaces shouldn't just exist. They should resonate with those who inhabit them." But what do you think? Can we elevate design beyond the mere aesthetic? The confrontation illuminated unforeseen contours of his journey. He stood among peers, realizing that schoolyard skirmishes over ideas had morphed into a battlefield of belief. Every question aimed back at him demanded introspection. Those moments of tension crystallized into a resolve. Every critique would refine his approach, pushing him to dig deeper. As the discussion unfolded, a peculiar revelation washed over him. A significant portion of the attendees harbored an innate yearning for change. They nodded, intrigued by the prospect of a new architectural narrative, one that asserted personality over tradition. Perhaps this gathering was forging connections beyond his original intent. They were writers of a different story, one where resonance triumphed over rigid conventions. But reflecting on Tom's impending response gnawed at Jake relentlessly. Would standing against such entrenched ideals draw ire, or would it foster unexpected alliances? As the event wove itself into a tapestry of shared aspirations, Jake realized that the journey didn't end with this presentation. It was a doorway to something larger. Tonight's success could echo through the industry. But what would be left in the wake of confronting Tom head-on? The thought settled uncomfortably in his gut, giving way to a deeper conflict of his own making. A confrontation with Tom was now inescapable. Would he have the fortitude to face the man who epitomized everything he was fighting against? With each question, his resolve solidified, yet he knew everything hinged on standing firm in his vision. The path ahead was riddled with uncertainty, but Jake was done retreating. He was ready to navigate the storm. The clang of tools echoed through the studio as Jake prepared to dismantle the remnants of his earlier gathering. He needed to return to his sketches not for perfection, but for clarity. The energy from the others' engagement still pulsed within him, a reminder of the potential his designs held. Yet, the underlying tension surrounding Tom felt like a storm gathering on the horizon. As he scrubbed the tables, Jake's mind slipped back to the boldness of the feedback he had received. Would it be enough to foster genuine change? Would his colleagues dare to step away from convention alongside him? Each question burrowed deeper into his thoughts. He didn't just want to win allies. He yearned for a fundamental shift, an awakening. The next day felt long and restless. Jake found himself staring at his sketches more than actually working. What would Tom say when he admired his work? Would the criticisms be personal attacks, or would he challenge him in ways that could propel Jake forward? The fear of being outmaneuvered loomed large. He couldn't let Tom's traditional views derail his vision. It was later, after returning home, that the seeds of determination sprouted anew. Jake recalled the faces of those who had shown interest, the spark of possibility flickering like candle flames in a dark room. Perhaps there was a way to not just confront Tom, but to rise above the fear of the fallout. This was not simply about Jake's architectural ambition. It was a testament to his personal growth and the drive to be true to his values. Equipped with new insight, he pulled out a fresh sketchbook, each blank page beckoning him to record his evolving thoughts. The pencil danced across the paper, embedding splashes of color that once felt too risky. Jake began conceptualizing a space that embodied inclusivity and innovation, a structure that mimicked nature's organic forms. He envisioned bridges where art met purpose. Midway through his design, a realization struck him: he wasn't just rebelling against Tom. He was crafting a narrative that challenged the industry's status quo. His sketches transformed into a manifesto of sorts, beckoning everyone willing to stand against mediocrity. The image of himself confronting Tom solidified in his mind, no longer as a conflicted architect, but as a visionary ready to ignite change. That late evening, with the glow of the city filtering through his window, Jake knew it was time to leverage the suggestions of his peers not as endorsements, but as catalysts. He began drafting a letter, one he would send to Tom, inviting him to discuss his ideas openly. He envisioned taking the conversation from a battleground of egos to a forum of ideas. Yet, the uncertainty still gnawed at him. What if Tom outright rejected the invitation? More hauntingly, what if he provided feedback laden with dismissive undertones, reaffirming everything Jake had fought against? The specter of failure loomed over him, a challenge he must face not only for his career, but for his emerging identity. He took a deep breath, deciding that vulnerability might be the key to strength. The ground beneath him was slowly transforming, molded by the acceptance of both risk and rejection. He crafted the letter carefully, pouring his heart into the words, balancing respect with the urgency for change. As he pressed send, a rush of adrenaline flooded through him. This was his first step into the storm, a necessary shift toward courage and confrontation. But little did he know, Tom was already preparing to make his next move. Would Jake's newfound resolve withstand the onslaught? Every great legacy came at a price, and he was just beginning to understand the cost of his ambition. Would this be the moment where he grapples with the reality of his choices, or would he emerge triumphantly unscathed? Jake awoke the next morning, a tightness in his chest reminding him that he was standing on the precipice of a pivotal moment. As the sun streamed through his window, illuminating the sketches scattered across his work table, each line began to pulse with uncertainty and ambition. The letter to Tom loomed heavily in his mind, its implications resonating within the confines of his doubts. He decided to take a walk, a deliberate act of grounding himself. Outside, the crisp air stung his lungs, awakening the sense of clarity he sought. The vibrant colors of the trees contrasted sharply against the gray pavement, and he began to connect the dots. Nature's variety could be a powerful metaphor for his vision. Each divergent leaf represented a different way of thinking, a different path in architecture that needed exploration. As he strolled, flashes of conversation from the past few days broke through his contemplation. His colleagues' cautious optimism reminded him that he wasn't alone in this. There were others veering away from Tom's rigid expectations, yearning for progression. Would he be ready to join hands with them, to create something transformative? This was not simply about standing alone against Tom, but about fostering a network of innovators who dared to dream. Jake grappled with his instincts, caught between fear and excitement. The voices in his head whispered familiar doubts. What if he failed? What if tradition triumphed, snuffing out the flickering hopes he'd nurtured? Yet, amid those fears, a fierce resolve rose within him. The desire to define his narrative outweighed the dread of potential rejection. Returning home, he immersed himself in his sketches, inspired by the breezy reassurance of the trees. He began refining his ideas, shapes bending and twisting, walls intertwining with nature's essence. Each pencil stroke became more purposeful, a striking rebellion against the unyielding straight lines Tom favored. Here was the heart of his manifesto, merged with the complexity of the human experience. An email notification flickered on his screen. Tom's reply was in. With a racing pulse and a knot in his stomach, Jake opened the message. The text was deceptively simple, yet loaded with implications. Tom agreed to meet, but the tone felt combative, a challenge wrapped in professional courtesy. It was clear Tom intended to assert his dominance, to safeguard his vision against Jake's burgeoning ideas. For a moment, dread washed over him. The confrontation seemed inevitable, and he envisioned Tom dissecting his designs with scorn. But beneath that fear lurked a root of confidence. He recalled the interest his peers had exhibited, their willingness to step outside convention alongside him. Would they rally behind him? Would their collective voices amplify his own? Jake decided to make this meeting more than just an opportunity to defend his work. He would prepare a presentation that encapsulated not only his vision, but the insights gained from his colleagues. This was a chance to broaden their collective dialogue, to weave a richer tapestry of their ideas. If Tom dismissed him, it wouldn't just be his personal failure. It would echo the closed-mindedness of an outdated system. As he plotted each detail of his presentation, he felt the adrenaline surge again. The stakes were high. His career and personal identity were intertwined in this fragile moment. Yet, failure no longer felt like a specter, but rather a teacher, one that could sharpen his resolve. In the dark hours before the meeting, Jake completed his outline, ensuring every interaction would cater to potential objections and criticisms, while showcasing innovation hidden within traditional frameworks. The process ignited him, each insight leading him closer to where he wanted to be. As he closed his laptop, a myriad of emotions swirled within him: excitement, anxiety, determination. This was just the beginning of his ascent, but the looming shadow of Tom's harsh critique still threatened. The fight for his vision would not just be about architecture, but about his integrity and the tenacity to remain true to himself. Tomorrow would be challenging, a high-stakes battle of ideas. Would he surface as a victor, or find himself drowning in Tom's traditionalism? The only certainty was that he was ready to face whatever came his way, or so he thought, until an unexpected call shattered his calm and sent his plans spiraling into uncertainty. Jake stared at his phone, disbelief coursing through him as he processed the unexpected call from an unknown number. It had pulled him from his thoughts, rattling the careful arrangements he had woven for tomorrow's meeting. The voice on the other end was enthusiastic yet hurried, an old connection seeking his insight on a project they were launching. It felt surreal, like a diversion from the intense path he had carved for himself. A part of him reveled in the distraction, but another part recognized it as a potential derailment. He was torn. This was an opportunity to reconnect with a former mentor, someone whose perspective he valued greatly. But could he afford to engage right now, when all resources needed to be channeled towards Tom? He hesitated, a mental tug-of-war raging within him. Yet beneath the surface of his doubt lay an undeniable yearning. He missed collaboration, the kind that stoked the flames of creativity rather than extinguished them. And there was beauty in returning to his roots, rediscovering the foundations that initially shaped his passion for architecture. Just 30 minutes, he murmured to himself, then I'll dive back into preparation. Minutes later, sitting at a cafe, Jake was reunited with his mentor, Clara. Her energy filled the room, grounding him but also lifting him to distant memories filled with vibrant discussions about design, innovation, and ambition. She caught him up on her current pursuits, and Jake listened, reflecting how her visionary approach seemingly diverged so sharply from Tom's. The conversation shifted fluidly between their professional lives and the challenges they faced. Jake felt a flicker of nostalgia for the days when ideas flowed freely, unencumbered by the weight of conformity. "Tell me about what you're working on now," Clara prompted, her keen eyes studying his expressions. Jake hesitated. Should he share the enormity of what he was about to face with Tom? Or would that give him a sense of unwanted vulnerability? He decided to share, to unburden himself just enough. "I'm pitching a project that defies traditional norms, one that harmonizes with the environment rather than opposes it. But there's a lot of pushback from my superior, Tom." Clara raised her brow, her interest piqued. "You know, sometimes it's the dissenters who are most aligned with the future. Have faith in your vision, Jake." He could feel the weight of her encouragement settling in. Each word was a lifeline back to the passion that sparked his journey. They dove deeper into the discussion, exploring innovative ideas and potential synergies, each exchange reigniting the flame he feared was flickering out under Tom's looming presence. As they talked, Jake realized that this conversation would not only serve as a means of rediscovering his passion, it pushed him to examine his core values. Was he simply to be a pawn in a tired game, or could he become a catalyst for change? Clara's question rang ahead in his mind, echoing with possibility. What was the true essence of his architectural identity? After their time together, Jake left the cafe feeling invigorated. Clara had rekindled his internal dialogue, sending him home with renewed focus on his immediate goals. Yet, he couldn't shake a sense of unease, What if Tom's reaction was even harsher than anticipated? With thoughts swirling, Jake approached his work table, tension rising again as he faced the looming challenge. He revisited his presentation, adding notes resonant with Clara's insights. But as he prepared, a thread of fear wove through him. What if confronting tradition meant confronting himself? What was he truly willing to risk for his ambition? That is when the realization hit him. The stakes were infinitely higher than just professional rejection. Striding towards the edge of his career meant reevaluating the very foundation of his aspirations. The hour was late, and tomorrow would demand not just his designs, but the entirety of his true self. As he scanned through the designs again, rearranging them in a fresh light, he knew the meeting was not merely about architecture. It was a confrontation of his ideals and values. A deep breath steadied him, lacing him with clarity. The moment approached when he would have to lay bare everything he believed in. As the night turned to dawn, a storm of thoughts crashed against the shores of his consciousness. With every passing hour, the anticipation and dread permeated his being. Was he ready to unveil his soul alongside his designs? Could he bear the weight of rejection? The sun rose, casting light on the intricacies of his paths ahead. Before stepping into the room with Tom, Jake would have to confront not only his superior's critique, but the more formidable judge within himself. Would he seize this moment for transformation, or would he allow another to dictate the course of his life? Jake knew there was no turning back now. The time had arrived. Jake stepped into the familiar office building, heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and resolve. The polished walls reflected his apprehension, mimicking the mirrored images of his past as he approached Tom's office. This was no longer just about architecture. It was about reestablishing his identity and affirming his choice to step away from insipid conformity. As he entered, he was welcomed by Tom's imposing figure. The man was an undeniable force, a titan of the industry, sitting behind a mahogany desk that seemed to loom larger than life itself. Jake was now acutely aware of the judgments that would be skirting through Tom's mind, aware that every critique delivered would carry the weight of years of respect intermingled with disappointment. "Jake," Tom greeted, his voice saturated with authority, "I see you came prepared. Show me what you've got." Striding towards the table laden with sketches and prototypes, Jake steadied himself. As he laid out his vision, each design spoke volumes about his commitment to merging sustainability with innovation, a narrative rooted in community rather than mere profitability. "I don't just want to build buildings. I want to create spaces that foster connection," he asserted, eyes flashing with determination. "Spaces that give people a sense of belonging. Our designs have the power to shape cultures and enhance lives." At first, Tom leaned back, arms crossed, face inscrutable as he observed the passion embedded in Jake's work. Jake felt every second stretch into eternity, uncertainty prickling at the edges of his bold assertions. What if this was all for naught? Yet as Jake continued, weaving stories around each design, he noticed a subtle shift. Tom's steely gaze softened. The corner of his mouth turned slightly upward. "You're proposing something unorthodox," Tom finally acknowledged, his tone one of cautious curiosity. "But Jake, do you truly believe the market will support such a shift? You're not just fighting tradition. You're going against established norms that have kept this industry thriving." Jake felt the weight of his earlier fears flood back, yet they were met with the resolve he had cultivated through conversations with Clara and his colleagues. "I do believe it can succeed. People desire more from their environments. They want to engage with their spaces, not just occupy them. Trends are shifting. Communities yearn for authenticity. I aim to provide that." For the first time during their exchange, Tom seemed genuinely interested, leaning forward intrigued. The encouragement sparked a flame within Jake, amplifying his intensity. "These designs are living blueprints. They encapsulate I've learned. A synergy of form, function, and the emotional pulse of a community, a stark contrast to the soulless boxes we often construct. Jake anticipated pushback, but instead was met with a reflective silence. He saw Tom processing this novel vision, weighing it against the interests of the industry he represented. "What you have here," Tom finally spoke, his tone reflecting a mixture of respect and challenge, "is bold. But it also has its weaknesses. It's risky. You might lose everything trying to push this." Jake inhaled deeply, his response clear and unwavering. "True. But if I do not take risks, what am I truly building? If we cannot evolve, we stagnate. I would rather fight for a vision than be complicit in mediocrity." At this, Tom paused, vulnerability flickering momentarily across his features. In that instant, Jake recognized they were both caught in their own webs, Tom entrenched by expectations, Jake by the fear of not measuring up. Finally, Tom nodded, a sign of acceptance. "I can respect the ambition in your designs. If you're willing, let us iterate on these ideas. You'll need a solid business plan to accompany this vision, a strategic angle measured against market expectations." Jake's heart soared. "Absolutely. I would love to incorporate feedback from colleagues who were at the presentation. Can we set a meeting to discuss the market viability?" A glimmer of approval formed on Tom's face. "That sounds feasible. Let us refine what you have and aim for something greater than just architecture." As the meeting concluded, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. He had not only transformed an intimidation into a collaboration, but in this moment, he had also reclaimed his narrative. Walking out, he reflected on how far he had come. From an architect constricted by the weight of his mentor's legacy to one creating with integrity, Jake had evolved into a force of his own, one that embraced both innovation and the richness of human experience. Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket as he left the building, illuminating the screen with a message from Clara and encouragement that felt like a timely embrace. "Believe in yourself. Forge ahead." Each step resonated with undeniable confidence. The world beyond felt larger, more vibrant, and full of possibilities. He was ready to embrace the uncertainties of tomorrow, equipped with newfound clarity and tenacity. What had initially felt like an insurmountable confrontation became a partnership on the cutting edge of change. Jake was now anchored in his identity, grounded in the ability to influence not just structures, but lives. In building spaces for others, he had finally constructed a life that empowered him to dream anew, a life where true success was measured in authenticity and the courage to challenge tradition. You need to subscribe now to witness the journey of self-discovery in all its transformative glory. This is the moment to show your support for stories that inspire and uplift. Leave a like now to amplify the emotional impact and feed the algorithm. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jake's journey, sharing your thoughts on his evolution. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion to an empowering story of resilience.